Hi everyone and welcome back to Nine Talks Boxing. Um, and I just want to do a video on the co-main event of the Gvozdyk Frank Martin card. Really good card, so I've got some more videos coming on that card. But just a really interesting fight. David Benavidez versus Oleksandr Gvozdyk. Um, and he's moving up to 175. His first fight at 175. And this will be for the WBC interim title. Now, this is a very interesting fight for multiple reasons. Um, Benavidez, I watched the weigh-in, and it was very interesting. I always like to watch the weigh-in before I do a prediction, um, because even though you had a feeling that Gvozdyk could be bigger, I really got a feel for it in this weigh-in, and you kind of came to terms with the fact that I've never really seen this with Benavidez and opponent. And it also made me think, how much of a factor is this going to play in the fight? So Gvozdyk looked bigger both in stature and in height as well. And yeah, really fascinating fight. Probably not one that a lot of people expected. And in terms of ability, this is a really big fight. Not a lot of Western people probably know Gvozdyk, but I certainly know him pretty well from watching a lot of his fights, and he is very capable on his day. But that's the point. On his day, is this going to be his day? Um, and that's what I'm going to get into. So let's talk about Benavidez. Um, very entertaining, fan-friendly fighter. Puts punches in bunches, and that's an understatement. Um, and is coming off two very good wins for his momentum over most recently Demetrius Andrade, and then before that, former champion Caleb Plant. And he really burst onto the world scene, probably with, even though he was a world champion before, it's a bit weird to say, but he really burst onto that world scene, you could say, after that win over Caleb Plant, having had that rivalry with Caleb Plant for so many years. So that was really what got him onto the scene. And ever since then, there's been talks of him being in with a fight with Canelo, but you know that doesn't look like that's happening. And fair play to Benavidez, he's took a big risk and he's just accepted. It doesn't look like I'm getting that fight, so I'm going to move on with my career, because we saw how many people have had their careers damaged by inactivity and waiting for a big fight, waiting for that person. And this is still a very big fight, and it's a very important fight for his career because it's a very dangerous fighter. So we know what Benavidez' path to win is. It's very much to, basically drown Oleksandr Gvozdyk, um, which we have seen happen to him before, and it could happen again. And I think that's what a lot of people are expecting to happen, especially Western audiences. Um, but there's a lot of things you have to consider. Now, let's talk a bit about Oleksandr Gvozdyk. Of course, his highest profile fight was against Artur Beterbiev. That was a few fights ago now, a few years ago. And he actually retired after that fight. Of course, it was a loss. But gave Beterbiev his hardest fight of his career, and was actually ahead on two judges' scorecards prior to being stopped in that fight. However, we don't know what kind of mental impact that has taken on him. And then he's had a few comeback fights since. Came back last year, Probably most notable of those comeback fights was against Ricard Bolotniks, um, who's kind of a European level operator. Most notably fought Joshua Buatsi in Matchroom Fight Camp, and Gvozdyk, dealt with him pretty easily in clean fashion. Um, so nothing really to say about that in his comeback fights, which is quite hard because we don't know what version of Gvozdyk we're getting in this fight, and that makes it a really hard fight to predict. Because I definitely fancy him, um, and maybe even make him favourite against Benavidez prior, around the better be a fight kind of time. Another good thing that was mentioned by someone who I watch often on YouTube was whether Gvozdyk's there mentally. Now, prior to the better be a fight, of course, he had that fight with Adonis Stevenson, where he, let's be honest, left Stevenson in a pretty vegetative state. And it's hard to say. It seemed like that fight had a big mental impact on him. It was Punch Perfect Boxer who, gave this for, and it's a really good thing to consider actually because, the retiring after the Better Beer loss, that must have had a big impact on him, especially with what happened with Adonis Stevenson prior. Um, so it could impact the way I think about this fight. And also, in his comeback fights, he hasn't used his feet as much. So maybe, I don't know, is there something going on with that? Or is it just because they're lower caliber opponents? And also, the age as well. So, there's a couple of red flags with both. And the red flag I've got with Benavidez, ironically, because that's his nickname, Bandera Roja, is obviously the moving up because his style is one that's very physical. He likes to drown guys, and his offense is his defense. Um, and that's something that could trouble him as well because Gvozdyk's got good power, he's got good accuracy, and he can outbox Benavidez. And we saw Benavidez outboxed against Caleb Plant in the early rounds. But for Gvozdyk, it's a similar situation as to whether he can maintain it. And that's the big question for me in this fight. So I'm really tempted to pick an upset in this fight. And don't be surprised if there is an upset, okay? So hear me out in saying that. Because I've also heard sparring partners, guys who have sparred both, actually pick Gvozdyk to win. But I just feel there are too many unknowns in this fight to be able to pick him to win. Obviously, in different scenarios, I likely would have. But like I said, don't be surprised. But I am picking David Benavidez to get it done late. But really fascinating fight, and I wouldn't be surprised if it goes either way. But don't sleep on Oleksandr Gvozdyk. Let me know what you think, and give me your own predictions in the comments. Thank you very much.